there is something that we always don't want to talk about, and that's what we call hypocrisy in church leadership. This refers to a situation where church leaders do not practice what they preach. They engage in behaviors or actions that contradict the principles and the values they advocate for their congregation. This issue can have several negative impacts on church community. For example, we have what we call erosion of trust. When leaders are found to be hypocritical, it can lead to a significant loss of trust among the congregation. And this makes it difficult for members to have faith in the guidance and teachings of that church. Another thing is moral delusionment. Moral disillusionment. It is where members feel that they feel disillusioned, or they feel betrayed, particularly if they have looked up to their leaders as moral examples. And when this happens, it results in a decline in morale and participation in church activities. Another thing is division within the church. You know, when leaders don't practice what they preach, members, hypocrisy can create factions within the church. As members take sides, they support or oppose the leadership, and this leads to divisions and even conflict in that church. It weakens the church mission. The effectiveness of the church and its mission and outreach efforts can be undermined if leaders do not embody the values and the teachings they promote. This makes it difficult to attract and even retain members. That's why you see a congregation with 500 members, it ends up being with 200 members, or rather 100 or even less, because it leads to spiritual harm. It can harm the spiritual well-being of members, leading some to question their faith, or even leave the church altogether. And therefore, it is important for leaders in the 21st century to address the hypocrisy that is coming up, that is being weaned in our churches. Number one, we need transparency and accountability. You know, church leaders need to be transparent about their actions and decisions, and there should be mechanisms for holding them accountable. There is a time that we were told that, you know, and we know that it is not good to point fingers at your leaders. However, there should be mechanisms for holding them accountable, because it is not everybody that comes to church that has been sent by God. You know, even Satan sends his own angels to come and congregate with the congregants, and they even lead from the pulpit. And therefore, you might be thinking that it's a godly leader that is leading you, only to realize that this is a Satan-sent agent. And therefore, we need to have transparency and accountability. Number two, we need to have what we call consistency in behavior. Leaders should strive to align their personal behavior with the values and teachings they promote. This is another core value. We also need to have open dialogue, where engagement or encouraging open and honest dialogue within the congregation can help address concerns. It can as well address grievances before they escalate. Some of us are used to divide and rule mechanisms whereby a leader separates, or rather brings divisions among their congregants, their members, so that one faction can support or defend the leader in whichever manner they want, whether it's right or wrong. Therefore, we need to encourage open and honest dialogue within the members, because this is the only way we can address the concerns and the grievances before they go far or they escalate. We also have what we call restorative actions. You know, whenever hypocrisy is identified, appropriate measures such as public acknowledgement, we have apologies, we even have corrective actions, how to correct one another. Remember, the Bible says, correct one another in love. This can help restore trust and integrity. And lastly, as I finish, I want to state that we need to have support systems, because by providing support and guidance for leaders to help them maintain high ethical standards, it also promotes personal integrity, and this is so essential in church leadership. And therefore, we have seen an emerging tendency whereby hypocrisy in church leadership is on the rise. And we have seen this situation where leaders do not practice what they preach, and they engage in behaviors that contradict the principles and values that they advocate. This has further brought several negative impacts on the church community, and therefore it needs to be addressed by spiritual people. However, I want to wind up by leaving you with one question. You know, I was reading one book in the Spirit of Prophecy, saying that one time God's servant walked into a church, and this is the book called Christian Service. And then God's servant found that Satan was in the church, but he was asleep. Then the servant asked, "Why are you asleep in the church?" Then Satan answered that my work is finished. What do you mean? What do you imply that your work is finished? He says, you know, I've finished here, there's nothing to do. Meaning that from the leadership to membership, everybody has been, let me say, converted to be a follower of Satan. And therefore, he had no work to do in that church. Could that be the situation in your church, in our churches today, that Satan has finished his work and he has no more work to do? And when I was reading the book of Revelation, it says that now Satan has put his seat on the synagogue. Meaning that now even preaching is not being done by God's people. Now even preaching is being done by Satan himself or Satan's agent. Oh, how dangerous it is that Satan is in the pulpit, is in the synagogue, and he is taking lead. Or to us, the 21st century generation, if we are hypocritical, if we have the hypocrisy that we have talked about, from leadership to membership, from the church leaders to the congregants, such an amount of hypocrisy, how then are we going to identify? How are we going to acknowledge? How are we going to differentiate between God's messenger, God's servant, and the devil's agent? Till next time, I'm Orina Montiri.